Hello there guys, what is going on? Son of Chelsea back here again for another video answering your questions once again you kindly submitted. This is probably the most amount of questions I've had through both Twitter and YouTube, so I've got a few to get through and some great topics to talk about, so let's get into it. Firstly, here with Jonathan Mann, who asks, would you rather sell Batshuayi and have Broja as third striker next year? I've got a couple questions about loan players, and in the case of Broja, I think he will probably get a loan. I'd probably say no to this because I think Chelsea should sell Batshuayi and, you know, get another striker in. But I don't feel Broja, a bit like the Maatsen situation, if he's not going to get any playing time, I don't see why he should be third striker. If he's ready to play football, I think he should probably get a loan to the Championship, in my opinion. Ms. Rahman, who's been a guest on the channel before, great guy, asks, once the Premier League restarts for Chelsea, do you deploy Loftus-Cheek immediately or ease him in? He was already fit before the lockdown but never got a go off the bench. Do you unleash him as a new signing almost? I feel like the 5 sub rule is going to be massive for Lampard during these opening games from like Aston Villa and the first couple of games back in, because I feel like players like Loftus-Cheek and Pulisic and HUDSON-ODOI and Kovacic are going to really benefit off of this. All our assumptions at the moment, I think, is that probably the players that played last time are going to be fittest to start for the upcoming games, but we may be proven wrong. Pulisic and Loftus-Cheek may be in the first starting 11. Chelsea have been very cautious with Loftus-Cheek, rightly so, considering his history with injury and fitness problems, so I don't see why just post-lockdown they're going to be different, and I feel, as I said, the 5 sub rule, I think, to get him back to fitness, I think you could see Loftus-Cheek coming off the bench in that first game for a few minutes, but I feel Lampard will be cautious personally, in my opinion, so I don't feel he'll restart immediately, but I think it won't be long until he gets back to fitness and becomes a first team regular again. Jay asks, what are your thoughts on our upcoming fixtures, considering that we still have to face some strong teams? It's going to be difficult for Chelsea because really it's the unknown factor here of how lockdown has affected teams' forms. Has Chelsea's momentum from Everton and Liverpool completely stalled now? And very much it's going to be, you know, refreshing that and trying to get back to some sort of momentum and flow, and how that's going to affect the rhythm of all teams in the Premier League. Got to face Aston Villa, who are going to be fighting for survival. So you've got those teams that are going to be battling, that are going to give you a real challenge and are fighting for their own thing. You've got Sheffield United and Wolves, who I believe Wolves were playing on the final day of the season, so it might not be as difficult by then if things are really settled. But two teams that could make Champions League football and could make European football, especially Sheffield United, who've been brilliant this season. Got to play both Liverpool and Man City, which are going to be massive tests for Chelsea. Probably by the time we play Liverpool, they will have won the Premier League, but there'll still be probably that thing, even without a crowd, that they'll want to keep their home record intact. I think the Bundesliga has proven, you know, this thing about home and away, how it's almost becoming an irrelevancy in a sense, because you're seeing so many away victories. That could benefit Chelsea in games against Aston Villa and teams like that, Sheffield United as well, where Sheffield United and Aston Villa, I think, prime examples where the hostile crowd can really urge their team on. When you don't have that, I think that could really benefit Chelsea in playing our game and getting into a rhythm. But it's going to be difficult. It's no easy task for Chelsea, especially because Chelsea really have been quite inconsistent recently. We haven't won back-to-back Premier League games since November, so it's going to be a challenge for sure. RJP Journalism asks, if you could sign one player from clubs in the bottom 5, who would you pick and why? Pretty simply for me, Jack Grealish from Aston Villa. I love watching him play and I think he's an exceptional player. Worldwide Chelsea asks, who do you think Chelsea will actually sign? It's very difficult to actually name exact players. I feel Chelsea will sign one more winger, potentially a right winger. I feel we'll sign a left back, and I think we'll sign a striker. I think that's the 3 that I could probably say and hang my hat on. I think Chelsea will go out there for. I think other positions like central defender and central midfield, I think, will be left potentially this summer, because if the market is so unpredictable and very difficult to make deals happen, I just can't see like Kai Havertz, for instance, that keeps on being mentioned. I don't see Chelsea spending 90 million on a player in that position, because I don't think it's essential. I think if you would, everyone talks about Jadon Sancho or Kai Havertz. I think the reason why Chelsea might go all out for Jadon Sancho is just because of the position they want to strengthen and need to strengthen. So that's the answer I can give you. In terms of names, Tagliafico I think would be brilliant. I think, we talked about Ben Rama, we've talked about Sancho. Boga I think is off the table now in terms of striker. We've talked about, a number of names up there as well in terms of Dembele. Mertens I think is off the table as well now. So it's going to be very difficult to know what names. There's probably names we haven't talked about that could be signing for Chelsea. Bagger TV asks, Telles may still be a possibility as has been reported in the press today. Who would you rather see Chelsea sign, Telles or Tagliafico? I think Tagliafico now, just because of that price tag. I think Chelsea have got to go and make that happen if they want it, because it's a brilliant price. It really is. 22.5 million. Telles has been a good player to be linked with, but I just think Tagliafico, to me, I think it's almost a no-brainer to fix that problem Chelsea have had for a number of years. Miko asks, are you impressed with Marina's work so far? I think you have to be. I think in the sense that selling players, Chelsea, especially now moving into a club that want to be more self-sustainable, and that's the intention of Roman and the board and where Chelsea want to be going forward. I think Marina's done exceptionally well. Look at the fees she's got for Morata. Incredible to get basically the same fee we originally paid for Morata, when really Morata's stock in world football has gone down since he was at Chelsea. Incredible work. I think, signing all these contracts for the young players, Mason Mount, Loftus-Cheek, Reece James, Tomori, hopefully Abraham will be the next on that list. I think getting all those deals done have been as important of signing players, because that's the club's next generation and potentially can be the spine of Chelsea's team moving forward. So I think you have to be impressed. I think there's been a lot of criticism of her labelled towards her without the understanding of what her role actually is. And as we've seen recently with more reports that have come out about the inner workings of Chelsea's transfer business, she's not the scout. She's not going out there and scouting players. She's very much in terms of negotiating, which is clearly her strength, and she's clearly doing that well. And I think that's why Roman trusts her so much. So I have to say, I think you have to be impressed with what she's done for Chelsea. Daniel Sinclair asks, if Willian decided to stay at Chelsea, how would you play him and Ziyech next season? Would you start them both, or start Ziyech or start Willian? I think it's very unlikely, but Willian seems to always find a way to get himself back into the first team, but I get the sense that will change, because Ziyech is real competition, especially in terms of age and experience, and I think Lampard will want to lean on that. I can't see a situation where it's very hard to get in the mind of thinking Willian's going to stay, but I think if he was to stay, I think he'd struggle to get into the first team as much, I think, personally. I think that's, Willian's always, I think, backed himself to get into the first team, and that's why I don't think he's just accepting the current contract, because I think he still sees himself as a first team player, and you really can't argue with him if you just base it on the stats of this season. He's getting into the first team very regularly under Frank Lampard, but I feel that Ziyech and Pulisic, I think, are going to be, in my opinion, the main two wingers next season. So I can't see a situation where Willian would regularly start ahead of Hakim Ziyech. I think Ziyech will be more of a regular next season. I think fundamentally that's the reason why Willian is wanted to move away, because I think maybe he sees the writing is on the wall a bit and wants to still get first team football, which he may not get at Chelsea next season. Timori Catspot asks, would you let Jorginho go and let Ndidi come in? No, because I think that Jorginho does a very specific role for Chelsea at his best, and I think, we've got players like N'Golo Kante, we've now got Billy Gilmore coming through. I just don't feel, once again, central midfielder's position, I don't think that is essential for Chelsea to strengthen in. And lastly, Jay McIntosh asks, which clubs would you loan Andrew, Ampadu, Broja and possibly Gallagher to? An interesting but very difficult question to predict where all these players would go. Andrew and Broja, I think you could see them go to clubs like Swansea. Chelsea have already had a good relationship with Swansea. Mark Gurhey and Conor Gallagher going there on loan. Charlton, Gallagher went to Charlton, so Andrew as a creative midfielder could go there as well. I think, top clubs like that, Derby, obviously, Tomori and Mason Mount going there. Of course, that was very much in line with the connection with Lampard and Jody Morris. So, Chelsea haven't loaned any players out there this season, but they could go back there again. I think if Brentford were to stay in the Championship, I think the style of football Brentford play, I think would be very good for some of our young players to go and play with him. I think the biggest thing for Chelsea this season in terms of learning about Ampadu and sending him out on loan to a club like Leipzig was hasn't got enough football, hasn't got enough development time. I'm sure for him it's been a great learning experience under Julian Nagelsmann and the exciting projects of Leipzig, but he simply hasn't got enough games. If Chelsea were to loan him out again, I don't feel he should be going to the Championship. Premier League, maybe there may be a Premier League club out there for him that could give him real substantial game time. I think that would be one of the things in terms of a clause that Chelsea will want to put in a contract for a player like Ampadu is, if we're going to send him out on loan, there needs to be maybe a recall option if he doesn't get the amount of game time that's going to satisfy Chelsea, or he could just stay at Chelsea. So I feel Ampadu is a bit different to all of those players because he's at a different stage of development. He's going to want first team football now, and whether that's at Chelsea or another Premier League club, I think Chelsea have got to be very smart of where they send him, so he gets that game time that he needs. So that is it for this episode of Added Time. Thank you guys so much for submitting your questions. I hope you guys enjoyed watching the video. If you did, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Follow me on Twitter @SonOfChelsea, and I'll see you again.